Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Hey, really glad you're with us for the Monday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. We have no good martinis for you today, so buckle up. We've got bad, and bad/crazy. But Jim, you think America's ready for at least one more week of Taylor Swift, possibly 3 of Taylor Swift hype now? Although Jason Kelce's doing his best to make sure that she's not the front page story.
The more Jason Kelce takes off his shirt and hangs out the luxury box and shouts and woohoos, and he was partying with Bills fans before. They're kind of, first of all, I feel like they're only cutting to Taylor when it's sort of a appropriate timing. Either Travis Kelce makes a big catch or the Chiefs score a touchdown. Because there were times where they were just cutting to Taylor Swift because the Jets weren't doing anything in that Chiefs game. That they just were like, hey, let's just see what she's doing right now. It feels like we're getting reactions when it's more, appropriate. I don't know if it's fewer cutaways to Taylor Swift or not. And just, Jason Kelce playing Belushi at Animal House, that just kind of makes the whole thing much more, because Taylor's like, oh my God, this feels like it's getting serious. What if I'm marrying into this family? What if Jason Kelce's giving the toast at our wedding? Things are just going to go crazy. And it all makes the whole thing kind of more enjoyable about these, two pop culture superstar families coming together.
The only person happier than them is Roger Goodell. The fact that this...
He'll preside over the wedding, or as he likes to call it, the corporate merger.
You made a good point, though. If this is in fact a genuine relationship and not a massive PR stunt, and the jury's still out in my mind on that, Taylor can't say she doesn't really know what this family's like. So,
no, exactly. They're not hidden. They're not tucked away there. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk about some other news that broke yesterday besides NFL playoff results, and now we're down to the Final Four there. But the news we got yesterday afternoon, I believe during the first game, was that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is suspending his campaign. He's not even going to make it through to Tuesday night and the New Hampshire primary vote. He actually had returned to Florida. It kind of felt like this was coming when he'd canceled his media appearances on the Sunday morning chat shows. But he did release a video on X. And here is, first of all, him explaining why he ran and why it's important that the agenda he ran on stays very much in the forefront.
This is America's time for choosing. We can choose to allow a border invasion, or we can choose to stop it. We can choose reckless borrowing and spending, or we can choose to limit government and lower inflation. We can choose political indoctrination, or we can choose classical education. These choices are symptoms of the underlying struggle to ensure that constitutional government can endure and that Western civilization can survive.
Well, it was not long after that he said he's taken a very close look at this campaign and there's no point in continuing.
Now, following our second place finish in Iowa, we've prayed and deliberated on the way forward. If there was anything I could do to produce a favorable outcome, more campaign stops, more interviews, I would do it. But I can't ask our supporters to volunteer their time and donate their resources if we don't have a clear path to victory. Accordingly, I am today suspending my campaign.
And then he endorsed Donald Trump.
It's clear to me that a majority of Republican primary voters want to give Donald Trump another chance. They watch his presidency get stymied by relentless resistance, and they see Democrats using lawfare this day to attack him. Well, I've had disagreements with Donald Trump, such as on the coronavirus pandemic and his elevation of Anthony Fauci. Trump is superior to the current incumbent, Joe Biden. That is clear. I signed a pledge to support the Republican nominee, and I will honor that pledge. He has my endorsement because we can't go back to the old Republican guard of yesteryear, a repackaged form of warmed-over corporatism that Nikki Haley represents. The days of putting Americans last, of kowtowing to large corporations, of caving to woke ideology are over.
Well, a couple of things here on that last one, Jim. Some people were surprised that was part of the announcement. Part of it, I think, is he does have ambitions for 2028, when regardless of what happens with Trump this year. So he wants to keep a foot in with Trump supporters, although that clearly didn't work this year. And I think he and Haley came to genuinely dislike each other over the final few weeks of this campaign when they pretty much only had each other to swing at. Disappointing to me as a conservative. I think that Ron DeSantis had the best resume as a presidential candidate, at least since '84 Reagan, if not earlier, not only with what he believed, but what he was able to accomplish. The Republicans had a really good chance here, and decided to go with inferior options. And so it's disappointing from a conservative perspective, but the campaign rolls on.
Yeah, Greg, just a plethora of emotions when, relatively early Sunday afternoon, I'm trying to chip ice out of my driveway, and my wife comes out and says, "Hey, did you see the news about DeSantis?" And here's the thing. If DeSantis had announced the Tuesday after the Iowa caucuses, where he said, "Look, I finished 30 points behind the front runner, Donald Trump. I think their handwriting's on the wall." Okay. But all of last week he said, "We got our ticket punched out of Iowa." And then somebody reminded me, getting your ticket punched is sometimes a metaphor for dying, which seems a little, great. Because how do you spin a, 51-21, finish there? So there was the weird timing of it. He told Hugh Hewitt he had enough money on Thursday. He told Hugh Hewitt he had enough money to keep going through March. According to some of the reporters here at National Review, that's not the case. That he was hearing from donors, it's time to hang it up, it's time to go out, which I feel is a little dishonest about that. Cancels the Sunday shows, and apparently at that point it was clear he was dropping out, but the message was, no, this is just a scheduling thing. He's going from South Carolina to New Hampshire, and I don't like dishonesty. I know everybody's saying, "Jim, that's the way the game is played," and all that stuff. I don't like that. The other thing is that we can argue about whether DeSantis went hard enough at Trump early enough. I don't think you can dispute over the last few weeks that DeSantis's criticisms of Trump haven't been sharp enough. They definitely have been stronger and louder, particularly in that last debate. And I think DeSantis meant it. I don't think he was just saying it for the sake of saying it when he said Trump had let down the American people, he had let down Republicans, and that nominating him. And so to turn on a dime and say, "Yep, I'm endorsing Trump now," something about that feels disingenuous. Do you mean what you're saying now, or do you mean what you said a week ago? And if you really think Trump is such a risk to the country and such a risk to the party, it's just hard to believe that this is an authentic, wholehearted endorsement. This is just short of a hostage tape. And I know everybody's saying, "Oh, well, this sets him up well for 2028. Look, there's a lot of road between now and then. And by that point, he will have been out of office for 2 years. All of his battles with COVID will be even further in the rearview mirror. You look at everything he went into this cycle, the huge win in the reelection bid, this huge amount of fundraising network he had, the momentum, the degree to which he had been the center of, effectively the leader of the opposition all through COVID. He's not going to have that a couple of years from now. Now, may he have other things that he's done in a second term? Maybe. I don't know. It's hard to believe he's going to go into 2028 with a better set of circumstances than he had this cycle. So real deep frustration there. Some people gave me grief because I don't endorse people. I will tell you the day before the Virginia primary who I'm going to vote for. And the reason I wait until that last second, Greg, is you and I have we've seen candidates die shortly before the election. We've seen candidates get caught in scandals, the October surprises. You never know when a candidate's going to get caught with, live boy, dead girl, pig, some sort of horrible scandal. Oh, wait, I didn't want to endorse that guy. So my attitude is wait until the last second and then say, "Hey, this is who I'm voting for." I don't tell anybody else who they should vote for. That is, every vote's got to be earned. But early in this process, back in late 2022, I wrote a column for the Washington Post, one of my first big ones, saying, here's why DeSantis would be good for conservatives, here's why DeSantis would be good for moderates, and believe it or not, here's why DeSantis would be good for progressives and liberals. Now, Greg, I know it's going to shock you, but not everyone was persuaded by my arguments, and not everyone came around and said, yes, DeSantis is terrific. But I was perfectly happy with this guy. He was a flawed candidate. It was certainly a deeply flawed campaign. I think almost at every decision, from announcing on Twitter and having the technical snafus, I think he kept hammering culture war, which, don't get me wrong, it is an important issue in the Republican presidential primary. But you look at every general election survey, people are worried about the economy, people are worried about inflation, high cost of living, things like that. I think you had to talk about that more. I think, and by the way, you look at his term in governor, DeSantis did all kinds of good stuff that he didn't really talk about because it was so hyper-focused on how do we appeal to an evangelical in Iowa? And I feel like it was selling himself short. So look, maybe it was impossible for any Republican challenger to overtake Trump this cycle. Maybe once Trump got indicted 1, 2, 3, 4 times, it was going to be tough for anybody. But the hand that DeSantis was dealt, I don't know if he and his campaign played as well as they could. And I think this last we got our ticket punched. We're not going into it. Oh, never mind. Totally. We're out of here. Really, it was kind of the wrong note to end this campaign on. But hey, good luck, America.
What did we say last week when he said that he got his ticket punched? It sounds a lot like John Huntsman finishing third in New Hampshire back in 2012 and calling it a ticket to ride, and he didn't even make it to South Carolina. He also saw the tea leaves and got out. So anytime you're making a ticket metaphor,
You're done.
No,
nobody wants to be an usher. Yeah, all the tickets are electronic these days. Nobody punches any tickets.
Yeah. It's in your digital wallet now.
Yeah.
I think you said it right. He's a better executive than he is a campaigner. Reagan had a lot more charisma. Trump obviously has a personality that dominates a campaign or a debate stage, if back when he used to do those. Ultimately, as several people said on Twitter, this came down to, is the Republican base ready to move on from Donald Trump, or is it not? DeSantis gambled that they were. They weren't. It doesn't seem that way anyway, after Iowa and the polls we're seeing in just about every other state. But we'll see what happens Tuesday night in New Hampshire. And if that's lopsided, it's going to be over pretty fast, I think. All right, let's talk about our first great sponsor for the day, and that is 4Patriots. Go to 4patriots.com/martini, where you will find fantastic deals on products from generators to survival food kits and a whole lot more. Deals going on right now include the Sauna Wrap Therapeutic Blanket at 80% off, as well as the Halo XT Tactical Solar Flashlight 4-pack for just $119. Of course, there's also the Patriot Power Generator 2000X. You really want to have that right now in these winter storms that are hitting different parts of the country. Charging more devices for longer in a blackout keeps that fridge, freezer, medical devices, and a whole lot more going. Never needs gas, fume-free, silent, and safe. 100% satisfaction guaranteed. And don't forget about the best-selling survival food kits. Also good in an emergency if the power is out. Just boil water, stir in those meals, simmer and serve, and you'll be all set. Visit 4patriots.com/martini to see this week's discounts and deals before they are gone, and get free shipping on orders over $97. Save more and get peace of mind now by going to the number 4patriots.com/martini. That's 4patriots.com/martini. Well, Jim, we mentioned Reagan a couple of times there, and it's only appropriate that we talk about Reagan on the next Bad Martini. Nothing that he did, but Reagan Airport was in the news over the weekend. This was on Saturday, putting out an alert about the fact that a bunch of crazy protesters were blocking the roads to get to the airport. And look, whatever your cause is, the best way to win new converts is to stop people from making their flights on time. I can assure you that that's the way to do it. But no, here is the tweet. Traffic alert. Expect delays around the airport due to a group in vehicles exercising First Amendment rights in roadway. Use caution and expect slow-moving vehicles. Recommend WMATA, which is Metro, to access the airport. And that immediately got a community note that said, there is no First Amendment right to protest on public roads. It is a misdemeanor under Virginia law where this road and airport are located to obstruct the free passage of others. And 3, unlawful assembly jeopardizing public order is also a misdemeanor. So, this kind of goes back to, the 2020 riots. Remember when Chris Cuomo back at CNN at that time was like, show me where the assembly and the Constitution has to be peaceful. And it's like, right there in the First Amendment. So this one's not explicitly, it doesn't say in the Constitution, in the First Amendment, that you can't be in the roadway.
Fordham, did we let that guy through? Who were the easy graders that guy picked? Anyway, carry on, Greg. I didn't mean to interrupt.
They keep saying that this is a First Amendment right, but it's not. You can't block the roadway. And in addition to just being a stupid tactic, it's also very dangerous because eventually somebody who's got to get somewhere in a hurry is going to do something. And I'm not going to feel all that bad for the people who are on the receiving end of it.
Yeah. Greg, first of all, the protesters' cars are exercising their First Amendment rights the same way that the villains' armada in Mad Max was practicing their Second Amendment rights. Actually, I think it's the people in the cars who are responsible. It's not like the cars themselves suddenly came along and it's Skynet or something like that. So the first thing, the other thing that jumped out at me, you hear about these kind of protests disrupting people trying to get to Los Angeles airport or San Francisco. And I don't know about you, certain big cities that have gone blue and have had serious problems with crime and serious problems with lawlessness. You're like, well, it's San Francisco, it's LA. All right, that's where those maniacs live. That's where it happens. New York City, hate to say it, but LaGuardia, getting to LaGuardia or JFK is always a mess. Protesters disrupt traffic. Who's going to notice? But this is serious because this is Northern Virginia. And, you and I both live here, and our attitude is like, look, D.C. might be crazy, but we keep it on that side of the Potomac. Northern Virginia, even if it's got a bunch of Democrats, prides itself on being fairly well run, at least compared to the District of Columbia. They know how to run snowplows around here. Generally, they know how to run school buses on time around here. They'll close the schools at the drop of a hat, but nonetheless, they know how to do these things. Once you start disrupting Dulles, it hasn't happened at Dulles, but Reagan National, then we've got a problem. When I moved from the District of Columbia to Alexandria, I bragged that I was governed by a much better class of socialist. Because the socialists in Northern Virginia still understand, look, there are wealthy, nice people who live here who very much want their city services and county services to work the way they're supposed to. When they got to get to Reagan Airport, they want to get to. So like now you're serious. Now you've messed with the professional yuppies. All right, now this matters, right? We just talked about the March for Life last week. Let's imagine pro-lifers go out and start blocking traffic to airports. Let's see how easygoing the authorities are in that circumstance. Look, they're just exercising their First Amendment rights, everybody. Got to be cool about it. Just standing up for the unborn. We all know that's cool. No, like they'd come down on them like a ton of bricks. They arrest people who pray too loudly outside of abortion clinics. They're not going to let you break you. But because this is a pro-Palestinian one, well, they're the Jew haters. We got to cut them some slack. Seems to be the general attitude we see there. So first of all, these are do you want to talk about this sense of breakdown of public order? Like, this is against the law. Why don't you guys in blue try enforcing it? Why don't you guys actually, because at some point, somebody's going to get really frustrated and they're going to plow through these guys like we used to, see ISIS in terrorist attacks. And by the way, most of those air travelers, not going to be crying a river. They'll be stepping over the bodies because, look, it's a long TSA line. I got to get to my flight, You hate to have that kind of attitude, but at some point there's going to be a terrible violent altercation, and it could have been prevented if law enforcement had treated these protests as the serious public disturbance that they are, instead of making excuses, I suspect, out of a certain amount of ideological sympathy.
Yeah, the verbiage here is really frustrating because you mentioned ISIS. Remember, they would be truck attacks, Christmas market or group of people, wherever it is.
Like it's Kit from Knight Rider driving by itself.
And now vehicles are exercising First Amendment rights. I didn't realize vehicles had any rights, which of course they don't. And this would bug me no matter where it was. But I don't know if you're like me, Jim, but when somebody drops you off at Reagan Airport, there's that really nice statue of Reagan right where the splits to go either up top or...
He's pointing like he's firing all the air traffic controllers. He should have been, they should have turned it towards the tower and say, "You're fired."
Exactly. But every time I do it, I snap a little salute and say, "Good morning, sir," whenever we come by. And
your Uber driver,
people wonder,
who is this weirdo? Yes.
Well, it's usually family. But
okay.
Nonetheless, here's Reagan when people sat in and disrupted activity at Berkeley in the 60s when he was governor of California. Let's see if he agrees with the statement from Reagan Airport here.
A small minority of beatniks and malcontents and filthy speech advocates have interfered with the primary purpose of that university, and they brought shame on a great university, a university of which you and I have a right to be very proud, and which for many years we have been very proud.
Yeah, I don't see a lot of equivocation there.
The audio I thought you were going to play, Greg, was a similar one. I think it was Berkeley, and instead of a loud protest, the students said that they were all going to turn their backs and be silent as he went from the limo into the building he was going into. And as I remember the story, that's kind of exactly how it happened. Everybody turns their backs, and it's, you can hear crickets chirping as Reagan goes up there. So he gets to the door, he stops, he turns around, and he just kind of smiles and gets up and shh, and everybody giggles. It was just this perfect disarming approach. And God, wouldn't it be nice to get back to that kind of a culture where, you have a First Amendment right to protest. You have a First Amendment right to say whatever you want, particularly when a politician is going to speak somewhere. But you can't disrupt the daily lives of other people. There are laws. You're not exempt from the laws because you feel strongly about some current events issue.
Some of these people need more sleep, and maybe they'll make better judgments than laying down in roadways near airports. And for that, they can turn to Magnesium Breakthrough by Bio-Optimizers. Yeah, magnesium is really important in helping you get not just more quality sleep, but waking up refreshed and so much more. And right now, you can get 10% off any order at biooptimizers.com/martini when you use the promo code Martini.
There are a lot of magnesium supplements out there, but a lot of them just give you one or two forms of magnesium. Magnesium Breakthrough contains all 7 forms of magnesium designed to help calm your mind and help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up refreshed. In addition to experiencing relaxed sleep, Magnesium Breakthrough also helps improve digestion, supports muscle recovery, and supports healthy bone density.
So do yourself a favor and make Magnesium Breakthrough part of your daily routine this year so you can get the vitality you need to conquer your dreams. Go to biooptimizers.com/martini and enter the promo code martini to get 10% off any order. Again, that's biooptimizers.com/martini. biooptimizers.com/martini. Well, we talked about the crazies who are blocking roadways. Let's talk about the elites. And how do we define elite? Well, according to a couple of surveys done by Scott Rasmussen back in September, as well as RMG research around that same time, elites are defined as those having a postgraduate degree, a household income of more than $150,000 a year, and living in a zip code with more than 10,000 people per square mile. So basically, urban areas where the income is quite good. And so they looked at different questions. On the first one, it's to the voting public in general, then to that elite 1% as defined. And then the last one is Ivy League graduates. And the distinction between positions here, Jim, is really stark. And unfortunately, the so-called elites have a lot more influence than the general voting public. When it comes to individual freedom, does the United States provide too much individual freedom, too much government control, or is the balance about right? For the general public, 57% say there's too much government control. Only 16% say too much freedom. 27% say it's about right. In the elite 1%, 47% say there's too much freedom. 21% say too much control. 31% think it's about right. And then in the Ivy League graduates, 55% say too much freedom. Only 15% say too much control. To fight climate change, would you favor or oppose the strict rationing of gas, meat, and electricity? 63% of the general public, normal people, say absolutely not. Only 28% people say yes. Now, among the elites, it's 77% strict rationing, 22% oppose. And among the Ivy League grads, 89% support the strict rationing. Only 10% oppose that. How much would you personally be willing to pay each year in terms of taxes and higher costs to reduce climate change? The vast majority, 72% of the voting public, say less than $100. And they also just have a fabulous, the elites do, a fabulous opinion of Joe Biden. 84% approval rating compared to 44% of the voting public. They also have high views of lawyers, union leaders, journalists, and members of Congress. So, and of course, they think that the government should have more say than parents in education. So, and by a wide margin. So, Jim, I realize this is a tiny sliver of the well-to-do in certain areas of the country, but how insightful is this on the divide between real America and some other places?
Particularly when they go to the subset amongst Ivy League graduates, and they said, how much faith do you have in union leaders, journalists, government officials, and lawyers? How many of them responded, I am union leaders, lawyers, journalists, and, You're asking me how much faith do I have in myself for a lot of these people. The one that jumped out, the statistic that jumped out at me the most in a study that had a lot of, you kind of suspected it was like this, but to see cold, hard numbers attached to it. They asked people to fight climate change. Would you favor banning? And they gave them a list of options. And one of them was private air conditioning. Unsurprisingly, only 13% of voters said, no, I think it's a good idea. 53% of those who they fit the definition of elite in this study. But amongst Ivy League graduates, 68% said they would support the banning of private air conditioning. You know what I say to that, Greg? Bullcrap. There's no way you're giving up your air conditioning in summer. We live in Washington, D.C. We know how hot and miserable it gets here. Oh, I would love to see the categories by climate, right? Maybe up in New England, people are like, yeah, I can do without we shouldn't have any. I'd be curious about how many Ivy League graduates who are living in the South were like, yes, I will totally give up my private air conditioning. Or whether these people, when they conceive of these government policies, banning gas stoves or anything else like that, recognize that as an elite, as an Ivy League graduate, as someone who likely has much better than the average citizen's connections to their local congressman, to their local mayor, city council, that they recognize, I'll be able to get the exception. My lifestyle will not be exchanged. We're going to ban unnecessary air travel. My air travel is necessary because I'm special. And that's the way it worked in the Soviet Union with the Politburo. That's the way it works with every one of these climate change conferences where people fly out in their private jets and they talk about the need to reduce carbon emissions, even though flying a private jet is probably the single most carbon generating intensive activity you could participate in. That like hypocrisy or a sense that there are one set of rules for everybody else and a different, more lenient set of rules for themselves. Like this may be at the core of these people's philosophy. I am one of the special people. I am deserve more. And I've seen some people like literally make the argument John Kerry or Al Gore are entitled to have much higher carbon footprints than the average person because they fight for the right causes, as opposed to some yokel who, just all they did was, become a millionaire, create a business, and make a lot of jobs. That bastard, what does that guy have going for him? So it's kind of depressing. And I guess at the very heart of it, freedom includes the freedom to be wrong. I'm not a libertarian, or certainly not a registered libertarian, because let's face it, that's a circus over there. But like, I could live very happily in a world run by libertarians because they'd let me do what I want and they generally stay out of my way. And at least on paper, libertarians believe in, okay, you live with the consequences of your actions. You choose, we're going to legalize drugs, but if you end up, lying in a ditch somewhere, well, you knew the risks going in, right? That's one of the reasons I think some of us have a little doubts about the libertarians. But the idea is you are free to make your own choices as long as you are willing to live with the consequences and you don't turn around and ask government to bail you out for the consequences of your bad choices. I think this is the opposite of that. I think this is like, well, we can't trust people with freedom. We can't trust people to make their own decisions because some of those decisions will turn out to be the wrong ones and they'll turn out bad. Now, I get the idea. Like, we see stupid people in our lives all the time. But you know what? It's not explicit. I would argue, Greg, it emanates from a penumbra that there is a constitutional right to be stupid. And that we don't need some authority from on high to save us from ourselves and from our own bad judgments. This country was founded by stupid people. It is populated by stupid people. And by golly, God willing, the ways of stupid people shall not perish from this earth, because we have that right. And the day some know-it-all nincompoop comes along and says, I'm going to save you from everything, things get worse because government cannot save people, cannot save stupid people. That's just who they are. It's their nature. And we need them to be free to be stupid.
I think the percentage of stupid people in the founding generation was slightly lower than it is now, perhaps significantly lower. But yeah, I'm glad you mentioned John Kerry. I feel like he got interviewed 1,000 times for this thing. Because, no, I wouldn't need air conditioning because that's phasing out fossil fuels and everything else. So it's good to know that the general public sees the truth on a lot of this stuff and wants nothing to do with it. But will they actually vote that way? That's the big question.
Newt Gingrich used to say Republicans needed to look for these 80-20 issues. Might have been even like 90-10 issues where there was a broad consensus, but, generally weren't talked about that much. These seem like some pretty good issues to talk about. Yes. Put it to Biden, it to any Democrat. Should we ban private air conditioning in order to save the climate? Because one of two things will happen. Either they'll say, no, we shouldn't, and the Greens will get angry at them. Or they'll say, yes, we should, and then the Republicans should win the general election. Should.
Yeah, you would think so. You would certainly think so. Yeah, you don't get to go anywhere, and you're going to sweat to death. Yeah, it seems like a great plan.
Go eat bugs.
Jim, happy Monday. I'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Please subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch podcast if you don't already, and tell some friends about us as well. We'd love to have them along. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a terrific Monday and join us again Tuesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.